What is the electromagnetic spectrum loop made of? The electromagnetic spectrum is comprised of all frequencies of electromagnetic radiation that propagate energy and travel through space in the form of waves. Longer wavelengths with lower frequencies make up the radio spectrum. Shorter wavelengths with higher frequencies make up the optical spectrum. The portion of the spectrum that humans can see is called the visible spectrum. However, NASA utilizes a number of tools that allow us to communicate and create images utilizing almost every single component of the electromagnetic spectrum in one way or another. NASA Havana syndrome attacks and attacks on targeted individuals solved. 3 important things a person needs to know to help them through a Havana syndrome attack, and then we will get into what Havana syndrome attacks are and what they do. 1. When having a severe attack, get into an MRI room as fast as they can. The magnetic resonance imaging room blocks all signals coming from the GNSS simulator system. The copper-encased room blocks everything from this attack. 2. Water is the best friend. It won't stop the buzzing or pressure in the head, but it will stop the burn from the electromagnet loop. Carry a spray bottle and don't use the water from the tap that is contaminated from the electromagnetic loop carrying radiation. Hell, any excuse to jump in a pool. 3. This is a big one. Have them carry a thermal camera or thermal attachment for their phone. Havana syndrome attacks are made of GNSS GPS phase-locked loops and produce radiation. They can be seen with a thermal camera. I have proof. This is my home. https. U2. B. They must not let their bodies overheat from the electromagnetic loop. It will cause confusion, nausea and eventually brain damage. I will include a list at the bottom of electromagnetic side effects. I do not want another human to suffer from this surveillance weapon. Be safe. Now let's begin. Havana syndrome attacks solved and explained. What makes up a Havana syndrome attacks? 1. GNSS simulator. 2. Wireless phase-locked LOOP. 3. Electromagnetic loop. Easiest way to explain a Havana syndrome electromagnetic phase-locked loop. It is an electromagnetic loop made with a GNSS GPS simulator. Most everyone uses a phase-locked loop every day. That would be your Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. Any electronic wireless systems produces a phase-locked loop around itself for the purpose of connecting with other loops and sharing and collecting data. But our Wi-Fi, Bluetooth aren't coming straight at us from our GNSS system, and passwords are put in place with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, etc. to help prevent hacking. When a GNSS GPS electromagnetic phase-locked loop is generated, which can be programmed with precise location and intensity because it is using a programmable GNSS simulator. Our electronic wireless phase-locked loops for GPS are not password protected and are constantly sending out and receiving data and can be hacked. All you need is 1 foot in the door and you have almost total access of a wireless data system. A GNSS electromagnetic phase-locked loop is sent to targeted places. A GNSS electromagnetic phase-locked loop is placed around targeted area which can be seen with a thermal camera because the electromagnetic loop does produce radiation. Thermal cameras can detect radiation. I have video of our GNSS electromagnetic phase-locked loop. Once placed around target, it syncs with target's wireless electronics, making an electronic roadway to receive and send data to and from wireless electronics remotely in this GNSS GPS electromagnetic phase-locked loop. This signal is coming straight from a GNSS satellite with no modem to buffer the signal. Each satellite within a GNSS constellation, there are 5, has a unique PRN code that it transmits as part of the CA navigation message identification number. This PRN code is a satellite identification code. This is how I believe our government knows where the attacks are coming from and why Russia and China have the backbone to do it, because they know the American government would never want our GNSS GPS surveillance weapon situation to hit the American public. The 5 GNSS constellations include GPS US, QZSS Japan, BEIDOU China, Galileo EU, and GLONASS Russia, which contains microwaves, radio frequencies, radiation, electromagnetic waves, and more. Causing microwave auditory effect hearing from target being engulfed with microwaves contained in an electromagnetic loop. When in electromagnetic loop, the victim is engulfed with radio frequencies and microwaves, causing over time the body absorbs radio frequencies ANDMICROWAVES, all contained in POSITIONABLE and mobile GNSS GPS phase-locked loop, creating a phenomenon called microwave auditory effect hearing, microwave telepathy, which enables target to hear radio frequencies and electromagnetic waves from PLL. This is what occurs during this phenomenon. The temporal lobe and the cochlea expand from the heat of the radio frequencies and microwaves and absorbs them, allowing the ability to be able to hear RF, microwaves, and also the ability to hear electromagnetic loop waves field from the digital optical phase-locked loop. In other words, upon absorption by soft tissues in the head, this launches a thermoelastic wave of acoustic pressure that travels by bone conduction to the inner ear. There, it activates the cochlear receptors via the same process involved for normal hearing. When target starts to hear the pulsing of the optical phase-locked loop and sometimes voices from the L11575. 42MHz carrier signal, and call THEPOLICE, they look insane. The police have spent no time in the optical PHASELOCKED loop, so they do not have microwave auditory effect hearing while the target does. Can be adjusted by the voltage control oscillation VCO. This is part of the PLL system. This would be the cricket volume control, giving the electromagnetic field more electrical current, making it more powerful, raising the audio level frequency. Audio decreases when less current is released when L1 1575.42 MHz, which is made up of radio frequency and microwaves, are joined in a digital optical phase-locked loop around victim, engulfing victim in microwaves, radio frequency, and electromagnetic waves. The voltage control oscillator VCO part of the digital optical phase-locked loop is the floodgate and gatekeeper of power for this whole system. Havana syndrome attacks. The power increased or decreased by the voltage control oscillator VCO increases and decreases all parts of Havana syndrome attacks. Radio frequency, electromagnetic loop, radiation, microwaves, etc. The terrorists know when they increase the VCO, they increase the power of the electromagnetic field loop, and that increases the sound of the cricket's noise produced by electromagnetic waves field, but it also increases the pressure, the burns caused by an electromagnetic loop, and the power of the microwaves and radio frequency, thus increasing pressure and overall power of all elements from the differential vector phase-locked loop. This causing different levels of purposely caused torture. Voice to skull, V2K, voice of God. Auditory sensations of clicking or buzzing have been reported by some workers at modern-day microwave transmitting sites that emit pulsed microwave radiation. Auditory responses to transmitted frequencies from approximately 200 MHz to at least 3 GHz have been reported. The GNSS GPSSIMULATORCARRIER signal L1 1575.42 MHz is well within that range. For those of you WHO know people WHO have been tortured by this device, please let them know that they are not crazy if they heard voices, but this system, with microwave auditory effect hearing, can make you hear voices and make you think you're insane. This is how GNSS GPS CA code 1.023 MHz is connected to L1 1575.42 MHz carrier signal made up of microwaves, radio frequencies, electromagnetic waves encased in a digital optical phase-locked loop. By adding a radio frequency into the CA code 1.023 MHz using binary BSPK modulation method, this radio frequencies and ORIP address becomes part of the L1 1575. 42MHz then sent out to target as part of the GNSS GPS phase-locked loop, which when target has microwave auditory EFFECTHEARING can definitely hear what is being carried in the L1 1575.42 MHz GNSS GPS phase-locked loop. Now the added radio frequencies are dialed in by terrorists ORP-ERPS on a two-way radiophone, ham and puff. The target hears voices and thinks they are insane. Remember, at this point the targets can hear the added frequency which travels to the L1 carrier signal, then becomes part of the phase-locked loop, creating channel direct communication from radio frequency to a target's head. A little added piece of torture these terrorists use so that you don't go running to authorities reporting them. I've been to multiple doctors. I do not have schizophrenia, nor do I have auditory or visual hallucinations. I have doctor's notes to back this. Here are some side effects from an ELECTROMAGNETICLOOPEMFs can affect your body's nervous system function and cause damage to cells. Cancer and unusual growths may be one symptom of very high EMF exposure. Other symptoms may include nosebleeds, headaches, heart palpitations, lethargy, tinnitus pronounced tinnitus, or ringing in the ears, is the sensation of hearing ringing, buzzing, hissing, chirping, whistling, or other sounds. Havana syndrome attacks cricket noise. Sleep disturbances, including insomnia, headache, depression and depressive symptoms, tiredness and fatigue, dysesthesia, a painful, often itchy sensation, lack of concentration, changes in memory, dizziness, irritability, loss of appetite and weight loss, weight gain, restlessness and anxiety, nausea, skin burning and tingling. Changes in an electroencephalogram, which measures electrical activity in the brain. Know a little more on PLL and VCOA. Phase-locked loop or phase-locked loop. PLL is a control system that generates an output signal whose phase is related to the phase of an input signal. There are several different types. The simplest is an electronic circuit consisting of a variable frequency phase detector in a feedback loop. The oscillator generates a periodic signal, and the phase detector compares the phase of that signal with the phase of the input periodic signal, adjusting the oscillator to keep the phases matched. Simplest analog phase-locked loop. Keeping the input and output phase in lockstep also implies keeping the input and output frequencies the same. Consequently, in addition to synchronizing signals, a phase-locked loop can track an input frequency, or it can generate a frequency that is a multiple of the input frequency. These properties are used for computer clock synchronization, demodulation, and frequency synthesis. Phase-locked loops are widely employed in radio, telecommunications, computers and other electronic applications. They can be used to demodulate a signal, recover a signal from a noisy communication channel, generate a stable frequency at multiples of an input frequency, frequency synthesis, or distribute precisely timed clock pulses in digital logic circuits such as microprocessors. Since a single integrated circuit can provide a complete phase-locked loop building block, the technique is widely used in modern electronic devices, with output frequencies from a fraction of a hertz up to many gigahertz. A phase-locked loop PLL uses negative feedback from a voltage-controlled oscillator VCO to ensure that the VCO output remains synchronized with some other reference signal. In a wireless system, phase noise in the receiver signal can increase bit error rates in the demodulated signal and cause this signal to fall out of sync with the system clock. Using a PLL cleans up this phase noise, removes jitter, and can be used to compensate for skew with parallel data or synchronize with an external clock with serial data. In high-speed systems or PCB design, propagation delay can cause desynchronization between digital signals in different portions of the signal, even if the phase of each signal is initially locked to the system clock. Frequency synthesis for wireless communications using a VCO as part of a PLL is a better choice than using standalone VCO for frequency synthesis. A standalone VCO used for frequency synthesis can accumulate drift in the phase of the output signal over long periods. A standalone VCO can also include spurious sidebands in the output frequency spectrum. A PLL contains a VCO and uses the output from the VCO in a negative feedback loop to improve stability in the VCO output. Using a filter can remove the sidebands, but it does nothing to solve drift. Both of these problems can be solved by using an n-integer or fractional PLL and locking onto an external reference frequency with higher stability. The output from the VCO in the PLL will be some multiple of the reference signal and will have narrower bandwidth compared to the VCO on its own. This is particularly important if you need to generate a fast series of clock pulses for high data rate wireless systems or computer peripherals, or if you need to synthesize a send a modulated high-frequency signal to a transmitter. My qualifications on understanding how my family and I have been tortured for over a decade. Hello. My name is Anthony Arellano. I want to tell you a little about my work history. I've had many jobs growing up. I've never been in the military where it seems as though the differential vector phased locked loop came from, but I did find my passion working for television stations Kuna, CBS, ABC, NBC. I worked as a TV director for many years and also received an Emmy for President Ford's funeral, but where I worked the longest in my TV career, all 4 stations, was in the master control department of these television stations, the heart, if you will, of any television station. Now, one thing that all television stations have in common are satellite communications systems, which is master control, the heart of EVERYTELEVISION station, dialing satellites in receiving feeds, dialing microwave live feeds, understanding Ku bands, and CBANDS and much, much more. After almost 2 decades I learned a lot. This is my torture-induced research. Please fact-check and know this. My family is still in the GNSS GPS phase-locked loop, so we are still being tortured for what, I believe, I know. Arellano family. This system is used for hacking and surveillance by terrorists and gangstalkers. One of benefits it gives them is it leaves no evidence if you don't know what you are looking for, and the victim most of the time cannot prove it is happening to them when they are being tortured. Well, it is going to stop, and these terrorists are from other countries. TYEY live in your town and they can be your neighbor. GNSS GPS systems can be bought online, so reports of Havana attacks and ALKONG need to be taken seriously. I have shown you how it is done now. Bust THESEASSHOLES.